Hello, everyone. So I'm glad that the university decided to cancel classes, but uh, we're actually still required to kind of make sure that you still basically keep caught up with what we're doing. So um, that and it's just a good idea just for everyone's sanity, including yours. Um, so what we have today is basically talking about um, the difference between your local and NetFile servers. We talked about this briefly at the beginning, but now that you've made you've uploaded more files to NetFiles, and it's going to get a little bit more complicated as we go forward. I want to make sure we have the basic understanding. So if you have a firm understanding of this, then you may want to kind of skim past this. But then I'm going to talk about how to identify your hyperlinks. Um, and again, if this is a review for you, then feel free to jump by it. But um, so that'll be the kind of the first part, and then we'll talk about updating how you organize your NetFile files so far, and also updating the links in your personal course site. Then we're going to talk about usability and findability, as well as sustainability, and kind of jumping back to the readings from a little bit ago, we'll talk about CRAP design principles and how that relates to usability, findability, etc. And then we'll kind of use these to develop your design philosophy. Okay. So difference between local server and NetFile server. So your local server is basically when you have a file, and I'll show you, these are the files that I have for this 210 website. The files that you see right here, these are located on my actual desktop computer. There's a copy of them on NetFiles, just like you originally created your index file and your module 1 file on your computers, and then you uploaded a copy to a different server, which is the NetFiles server. Okay. So what can you do from your local server? What does that get you? So again, back to the course site. Well, the first thing is that you can open and edit an HTML file using a coding software like Brackets. So I can do file open with brackets. I also have brackets set as my default. As you can see, it's the default. So I can just double click it and it'll automatically open it in brackets so that I can edit the home page for our course website. So it's the place usually to do the editing, right? Um, and by the way, if you want to set it as your default, um, I think you do. If you do other, if you click on other, you can choose brackets again, or maybe you want to use Chrome, whatever, and just click always open with. So I've already done that, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, okay. So think about which one you want to do. I usually am doing more editing than uploading, so I chose brackets as my default. The other thing that I can do is to preview what an HTML file will look like on an internet browser. Um, so if I wanted to, without having to upload it, like let's say I've modified the home web page. So let me show you. Um, let's say I just modified and added links to maybe all the modules or something. I did that by opening this with brackets, but I wanted to see whether they all showed up or not. Um, what I could do then, without having to actually upload it to NetFiles and see it on there, is I could just right click, go open with, and Google Chrome. And it opened the thing. So obviously I haven't made these changes yet, right? Um, but notice that when I open it from my local file, my local server, the hyperlink up here says file, users, Aaron Schaefer, library, blah, 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 blah. And then the name of the uh, folder and subfolder that I have these in, which is I call course site. So this shows me that it's on my local server. Um, So if I were a student and I wanted to send this page to the instructor, and I sent this hyperlink, I would the instructor would not be able to access it because it's from a local server, and you do not want me to be able to access your local server. I'd have to upload it to NetFiles and send the NetFiles hyperlink instead. But it's still useful to be able to preview an HTML file. So let's say that, in fact, I'm going to show you how that's useful. So let's say I would open this again on brackets. And I wanted to, let's say, just put some exclamation points here or something. I would do Command Save, and then since I've already got it open here on the browser, I could hit refresh, and there it shows up. Now, this, if I actually went to the page that is drawing from the NetFile server, notice the exclamation points are not there. So these are out of sync now. And I don't usually want that to be the case, right? So you just want to keep in mind that that's just a preview. So I'm going to save, go back and delete that and save that again. Okay. So I just want to make sure you understand that difference as you start to like work with some files on NetFiles, understand, and also knowing that you have that option to preview what you're looking at. From your NetFile server, you're making it. That's how you're making it available to me. So, and that's where you're able to create a hyperlink that will actually make it accessible through the web. Okay. This is super, 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 super important. The file organization of your net files should always match how your files are organized on your computer. So as I already said, you're using the HTML files on your personal computer to actually edit them, right? So you're always going to be kind of working with this set of files, but eventually when you're ready to kind of share them, you're going to upload them here. Notice that this is a screenshot from my personal computer for the our course website, and this over here is the net files. Notice that images, index, modules. So I don't have, you know, all the modules loose in this folder. They match. The organization matches. You will need to do the same thing. In fact, you'll need to show me that you're doing the same thing. So think about why that would be. It gets very confusing when you think, oh, this is how it's organized, and you go to create your hyperlinks, but it's a much different, organization here. It's going to be messy. It's going to be confusing. Always have them match, and I'll be reiterating this as we go forward. So, and this is just to reiterate that if you want to create a hyperlink that's going to be accessible to me, and anytime you're using this hyperlink of, https://msu.edu/ etc., your net ID and then the name of the file, it has to be uploaded to NetFiles. So just, I hope, you need to understand that. Okay. So how do we identify where a hyperlink is? So far, I've been giving you kind of a template of here's what your hyperlink will be if you put your file here. So when you had your first assignment to create your index.html page, I said if you put it up into your web folder and net files, that you've got this template here that tells you exactly what it will be. It gets a little bit more complicated when you start to put things in folders in your net files. So I want to break down how did we even get this basic template for your net files hyperlinks so far. HTTPS is just your basic internet protocol prefix, and the subdomain www, also very basic. Main domain, that's kind of, this is all through the bigger server of MSU. It's actually, I'm sorry, it's an entire domain itself. .edu is a top level domain, so you don't need to understand this, I guess, like super in detail, but you have your own kind of designated space, and that's and to help organize that, they use your .id to say that this is where you're going to keep all of your web files. And then at the end, before we've had, you had like index.html. That's the actual file in what we call the root directory. Now, directory and folders, they're pretty much synonymous. It gets a little bit more complicated, but you can think of root directory, and I've got it in writing here, that this is basically the file that's in your web folder on .NET Files. Okay. Sometimes I edit as I go along when I have new information come in, so it's not just because. Anyway, so this is, you've already added your module 01.pdf, and it looked pretty much the same, except instead of index, you're referring to, module 01.pdf. So pretty basic, right? Where it gets more complicated was when you start to add subfolders. So this is my web folder. Your web folder only has right now this index.html, and then you have module 01.pdf. Notice that my web folder actually has some folders within it. So I have at least two. I actually have three different subfolders in here: images, modules, and style. You are actually going to end up creating the same modules folder within your web folder as well. Why would you do that? Because you have multiple files of the same type, and this is good practice for keeping everything organized, for one thing, but also in terms of findability, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Now, this is part of usability. So your choices about site architecture should be simple and easy to understand. These decisions speak to your understanding of your site's usability, specifically helping users know where they are on your site, aka findability. So how is organizing what you have here related to how your user is going to perceive your site? You'll understand that more when you understand how hyperlink is actually created. And this is part of thinking about kind of what are the thinking about web standards, and kind of, there's a logic to hyperlinks that you may not have even been aware of before, but it can actually help people find where they are on a website just by looking. So right now, if you look at like this docsdoogle.com, we know it's a presentation, but there's a lot of other code here that's pretty complicated. But if I go to, like, let's see, let's look at this website. Watch the hyperlink as I go from site to site. Resources, student sites.html. So I've been very conscious about how to name these, right? Let's go to the modules. Notice that here, if I do module 1, it says modules and then module 1. And when I click here, it says modules and then module 2. So I might think that, oh, if I it's consistent, right? And if I would click, presumably it would be similar for module 3. If I, click 3 here, it would go to module 3. Okay. so there's a consistency to how it's organized, and I can tell kind of where I am in the site based on the names up here. Okay, so that's where it kind of matters. Um, so where does the name of this subfolder that's within the web folder, where does that go within the hyperlink? This is what this slide is about. So you may need to pause here and kind of like let it sink in if this is new to you. Once you understand it, it will dramatically help you as you go forward in terms of knowing where is my link located. Or what is my hyperlink called if I put it here. So basically, it's the same beginning, HTTPS. I kind of skipped the beginning part, but MSU NetID. Before I put the name of the file, though, I say what folder it's in. Before, we didn't have to worry about it because this we don't actually have to type web, even though it is a web folder. We don't have to type that folder name in here. But any other folder that you create in NetFiles needs to be put into the hyperlink here. And you can think of a hyperlink as a path to get to content. It's basically, here's how I think about it. If I had, let's say, I told someone to go get a pen from my house, I wouldn't want to tell them just to go to the house. It's in my house. I need to narrow it down more. But I would start with go to my house, right? And then I would say, okay, now that you're in the house, go to the study. And then I would say, in the study, go to the drawer, and then go into the little. I'd probably have a little special cubby for it because I love to organize. So notice that you're starting. The study is within the house. The desk drawer is also within the house, but you're starting with a kind of bigger, the thing, it's hierarchical. So the thing that's contained within the thing, you kind of start with the bigger thing first and move down to the more specific, all the way down to the destination, which is the pen, right? So the pen equivalent in a hyperlink is the actual page you're trying to land on. Everything before that is kind of folders and subfolders. So in case you're kind of unfamiliar with like folder versus subfolder, I just want to I think it's easier to show it just because the way NetFiles is organized. I'm going to show you from like using my local server here. So in my 210 site, this is a folder, right? I have a folder. It contains everything related to 210, including the actual course site for 210. So I can click on this and, oh, look, more folders within the folders. This is basically what's in NetFiles. There's some extra folders here that aren't present in NetFiles because they're like drafts or things from fall semester, right? But basically, this is what I have in NetFiles. And then I can go into the modules folder. So I'm going to click in here. I could, if I wanted to, add yet another folder here that just said design focused modules. And I could copy and paste everything that's related to design and move it in here. So maybe I want to organize it even more. I'm not going to actually do that. But let's say that I was going to do that. Okay. So within the modules folder, create a subfolder called design focus modules. Okay. And then we want to put module 08.html within that subfolder. So in other words, I'm trying to say that if I'm changing the location, I will actually visually show it to you here. I think that might be helpful. So we have the modules folder. Let's pretend this is our web folder, right? We have the modules folder, but within that, I want to create yet another subfolder, so it's a level down. So I'm going to create that here. and I'm going to call it design focused modules. Drag it into that modules folder. And I'm going to move module 8 here. And it's going to freeze. There it is. Okay. So before, I've already shown you how I got to module 8, right? Let's go back and look at what that looked like. I had we put the basic kind of template for the hyperlink. Then we put the name of the subfolder that's within the web folder of NetFiles. You can see it here. And then we know that all the modules are in there, so then we just put the name of the file. But now within this folder, we have another folder. So where would that next subfolder go? Well, back to the metaphor of the house, you start with the house, then it's in the room, then it's in the drawer. This is kind of like the room. The next subfolder is more like saying the drawer. Okay. So, so in other words, now that we've added this drawer right here, and we've moved the item within this drawer, let's see what it would look like. And you can just kind of, I think it's better to just look at the actual hyperlink itself. It's still within the room, right? The modules folder, but now it's within this specific drawer, the next subfolder that's within this, and then we have to name the file. So again, we don't actually name that the big web folder that everything goes in is here, but it's basically, if it were, it would say web and then subfolder, modules, subfolder, design focus modules, and then the name of the file. Okay. So again, if you need to pause this and kind of like study it, or rewatch it a couple times, I think it's definitely worth the time to really have this solid in your mind, because it'll save you headaches later and also reduce anxiety. Okay. So the big thing though, notice that if I've now changed the pathway, like the directions to get to this quote unquote pen on this module 8, I'm going to need to update the hyperlink for module 8 because it's in a new location. I need a new set of directions because it's in a new location. So be very conscious of that. This is a good reason to also know how you're going to organize your files ahead of time, because otherwise then you have to go back and update all of your hyperlinks because you didn't think about where they were going to be located at the very beginning. So I've actually kind of I've actually on purpose made you not put them in a folder right away so that you could understand that, okay, now your hyperlink is going to change, because I want you to create this module subfolder and I want you to start organizing them in that way. But that will give you practice and kind of like emphasize in a low stakes way why that needs to change. Okay. Okay. So getting used to thinking about your hyperlink as a set of directions and understanding how that relates to where your files are, where and how your files are organized in NetFiles. So what I want you to do, and you've got until Wednesday to do it, I haven't updated the schedule yet, but is to update your personal course site. So you already sent me your module 1 in a direct message. Some of you may have already updated your hyperlink. But when I go to, let me test out someone's site maybe. When I actually go to, let's say, Caroline's site, and I click on her link to module 1, nothing shows up, um, because I haven't instructed you yet to update these links. You instead of updating your personal course site, you just sent me a direct link to it. So I'm able to access her module 1, just not through her site. So what I want you to do next is to update it so that these links are active. So let's look at what that would actually look like. So remember that you can view any code by just doing view page source. And if I'm looking for the where to update the link to module 1, I'm trying to update this, right? I just look for that text link to module 1, and you can tell just by looking at what's next to it that, oh, this is where the hyperlink goes. So now that you understand how to create these hyperlinks, I've given you like an actual visual of it here. You should know, Caroline and everyone can go to their net files and actually create that modules folder, put it in there, and then write out this hyperlink. So I'm going to add the HTTPS. Okay. And then once she has copied this hyperlink here, you just copy that and you go into here. You'd have to obviously open your HTML file on, using brackets, or, you have to open your local file to do it, right? You can't edit it here. But she would basically just paste that into here and then re-upload it onto NetFiles, refresh the page, and then test it out, and then it should work. Okay. So that's what I want you to do. It's pretty straightforward. It should take you maybe like 5 minutes. Okay. And this is all just instructions for how to do that, so you can review that on your own. Okay, so understanding how to organize your hyperlinks and being very, I guess, diligent about identifying common types of pages on your site and putting them into folders when possible, being thoughtful about how you name those folders and being consistent about how you do that. These are all related to usability and findability. So usability, your choices about the site architecture should be simple and easy to understand. These decisions speak to your understanding of the site's usability, specifically helping users know where they are on your site, also known as findability. So when you're thinking about how the architecture, so how your site is put together, then it should be a predictable, consistent URL structure. This is about hyperlinks then, and a site navigation that reveals the general contents of your site, increase the likelihood that users will understand your site, what's on it, how to find it, and where they are in relation to the rest of your site. So again, this is kind of helping you connect the pieces of why do you need to know how to create hyperlinks, and how is that related to how you organize your files and how you name your files. So usability is also about findability. So findability and wayfinding are fundamental usability concerns of basic websites. Findability determines whether users can successfully find, like navigate to relevant information through conscious action, but wayfinding is actually enables users to establish a sense of where they are on your site and how to get to other areas if necessary. So to give you an example, it's kind of, think about it as if you're at a mall and you go to a map of where to find out maybe where a certain store is, like, I don't know, I don't go to the mall very often. J.C. Penney or something, and you see it on the site, and you see that you need to go, maybe 90 degrees to your right or something. You won't know which direction that is unless you know where you are. You need that icon that says you are here. that's about wayfinding, and I'll show you some examples in just a little while here. Um, so to kind of situate this in relationship to accessibility and usability, accessibility is about accounting for states or conditions of user access. So it acknowledges that there are particular contexts um, in which the site is going to be taken into that um, are sometimes unique. So this is, thinking about someone who has to use a screen reader. That's about thinking about, oh, well, there's special kind of circumstances here that we need to account for. Usability is about accounting for, in general, like user behaviors. So it's related to accessibility. Accessibility is these overlap, right? um, but usability is also related to conscious and unconscious actions users take when interacting with a web page or a website. And this is a good thing to remember, is let users be sloppy. So another way to put that, and I think it's actually the name of a book, a really good book, called "Don't Make Me Think," and it's basically saying that you want your user to effortlessly be able to find what they need to find, and they shouldn't have to think about it. It should be so well organized that they don't have to consciously be like, oh, well, it must be over here. They easily can orient where they are, and they can easily find what they need to find. So that's thinking about usability. And the other thing to know about this too is that when you are when you might think that your site is very usable and very well organized, and it makes perfect sense how it's organized, um, but it may not be. You really do need to test out and observe very carefully people using your site. You actually have to help them be very self-aware observers as they test out um, what you're doing, because um, there are just so many different things that can go wrong, and this is something that you'll you'll observe as we actually start to practice usability tests. So just keep that in mind for now, is that um, usability is something that you need to test out. Okay, this is the end of part 1, so make sure to watch the next part.